Yeah, with lawyers, you're not allowed to fee split, and you're not allowed to have a technically multidisciplinary practice. So I set Peace Talks up as a corporation. I'm the sole shareholder, and then everybody else works for me. So you're allowed to have employees of other disciplines, you just aren't allowed to be partners with them. It's gotten to the point where I think California at least recognizes that it makes sense for attorneys and accountants to be in business together, and in family law it makes sense for attorneys and therapists to be in business together, so they kind of look the other way on this stuff. But actually, did you want me to talk about Jacoby and Myers?
Sure, absolutely.
So in terms of the fee sharing and fee splitting, in most jurisdictions it's permissible for lawyers to share fees. Like if I refer a case to Bill, it's not my area of law, but it is his. He's allowed to give me in Los Angeles, well, I guess it's negotiable, but the kind of going rate is about 15%. So I refer this great personal injury case to Bill, and then he gives me 15% when the case settles. I pay all the people that work for me as independent contractors. We do have a little bit of a different setup if it's the mediator who's bringing the case to us. In terms of the franchising, though, when you set up your own business, if you're going to do anything more than twice, you need a written procedure for it. And so you don't lose the techniques and the consistency. So I've got 10 mediators. They've all been trained in the way Peace Talks does stuff. They all use the Peace Talks forms and templates. And so as much as because it's a personal service business, there may be individual differences in the room. The basic work product that clients get and the experience that they have is extremely similar. So there will be a lot of people who will tell you, oh, but what I do is so unique or whatever. Well, of course, everybody's a little bit different, but let's hope that people are handling law cases about the same. I mean, isn't that what the professional practice is all about? It's not that you do it exactly the same, but that you abide by the same rules and that you follow the same sort of thought processes and this sort of thing. So I've been putting it together. They call it a franchise Bible, and that's your list of all your procedures and so forth. And it's been interesting because I recently had a new hire, and everything that these people do wrong, or not how you had done according to plan, I've now realized is a learning outcome. Because it used to be, well, my instructions are perfect, what's your problem? And you realize, well, you know what, we've got 10 people and they're all doing it wrong. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's the written procedure, or maybe it's not the individual practitioners. So once you start to put these things together, you start to get a business model that you can replicate. As it turns out, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Jacoby and Myers, but they were the first multi-office law practice in the country. And as it turns out, Len Jacoby is a friend of a friend. And so we met for lunch, and I thought I was going to talk to him about the hazards of the...
Just how they differentiate from, big firms have got offices all over the country, but Jacoby and Myers was part of a storefront movement. So they had 160 offices, and the idea was to provide low-cost legal services in a standardized way, and they make a lot of money by taking a small margin, but and thousands of cases, and make a lot of money. But the business model ultimately had to be changed. The storefront revolution.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a very special breed of young lawyers in 1968, basically, and so
Very similar to you guys in terms of ethos.
You know what? I think that's right.
That's right.
A real sense of social justice and civil rights and some different things that were really compelling to people. And so Len Jacoby and Stephen Myers decided that at the time, lawyers were only for rich people. But they were like, a lot of people need legal help. I think we'd like to bring that to people. We'd like to bring lawyers to middle class and, sort of upper lower class folks who have money to pay, but who don't necessarily have money to pay the big fees of the lawyers. And so they did these forms and standardized practice, a lot like what Peace Talks is doing, so that they could open these law offices, and secretaries and administrative personnel could do a lot of the intake stuff. And when I talked with Len Jacoby, he said he spent the entire summer in the library after law school writing down what all the elements of all the different kinds of cases were, so that when anybody was doing an intake, they would have like a flow chart basically to follow. They eventually, they were the first lawyers to advertise. And it seems preposterous now, but at the time it was against the law. And the American Bar Association sued them, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. It took about 5 years, and the legal community was in an uproar. My father at the time was a dentist, and it was like really uncool for professional firms to advertise. And I remember him going nuts over the idea that a lawyer, this esteemed profession, would advertise. This is horrible. It was like the end of the world. So the Bar Association really came out against them. And then by like the next year, the Bar Association did a complete 180 and said, this is the future for law offices and lawyer advertising, and this is what we're going to see as the model going forward. So for a while, they had 160 different offices all over the country. They were basically storefront operations. They were able to market and do law for people who wouldn't be able to afford traditional lawyers. I think now that the legal marketplace has expanded that, maybe some of the reason that they ended up selling off their offices to the individual practitioners is that there became a more competitive market for this middle sort of, in business they call it tier 2. It's people who have money but who make choices about how they spend it, as opposed to people who are going to buy a Rolls Royce no matter what it costs, or people who will only shop at Walmart because they're only shopping on price. They were pretty firmly tier 2 and maybe a little bit tier 1, which is also where I see peace talks. So in any event, now 40 years later, believe it or not, they're a network of law firms that they seek out practitioners who are already doing a good job doing what they're doing, affiliate with them. Instead of being a fee share, or a lawyer referral service, they call it an ad co-op. And so if Jacoby & Myers refers a case to me, then I pay them 15%, and then that goes into they call it an ad co-op, which is a pool. I don't know if they do the TV advertising here, but their website and some different things that they do.
They became expert marketers is one of the things that happened from Jacoby Meyer.
They sure did.
Yeah.
They sure did. And you know what? In this day and age, you're going to need to be doing that too, unless you want to go work for the government or in-house counsel at a large corporation. The idea that I'm going to go and work at some law firm and I'm going to do a good job doing my technical work, and then I'm going to make partner and all this kind of stuff, not true anymore. I mean, a friend of mine's dad was a partner, this is 15 years ago, at a big firm in New York, and he was a named partner, and they said, well, you know what, unless you are able to bring in $4 million of business next year, you're fired. So that was 15 years ago. I mean, the climate is really changing. If rainmaking is not for you, then the idea of long-term success at a law practice, if partner is where you want to go, I think nowadays we're seeing a lot more just like associate kind of forever type situations. And if what you really love doing is the technical work, then that's what where you should be. I mean, to the extent I had part of my talk that I had to cut out because I didn't want to get banned is the
You can allude to it in the sanitized way.
The takeaway from it was I got the impression I was interviewing at this law firm that didn't want me. And it's a little like dating. You deserve to be dating someone who wants to date you. And our divorce clients eventually get that. You deserve to be married to someone who wants to be married to you. And so if you're really getting that this is not a place that wants you, you're shopping too, you're going to be miserable if you're always fighting against the tide. I mean, this other firm where I was the only woman and the only non-Italian, it ended up being kind of humorous. Here I was representing all these Teamsters and all this crazy stuff, and it was just, everybody was rolling with the punches because, it was a new situation for them too. And so that ended up being kind of fun, but it was as you're going out in your career and you're defining yourself, you need to be true to who it is you are and what it is you want to do, because that's ultimately going to be the best fit also. It's going to be easier over the long term, and it's also going to be more